9 deaths for every 8 summits. That was the price of climbing Annapurna in 1978, the year an all-women American team made history on the world's deadliest 8,000er. 2 of their climbers never came home. It should have been a cautionary tale. Instead, it became the first chapter in a 45-year pattern that has destroyed some of the greatest female alpinists ever to rope up. From K2's Black Summer to a 2023 avalanche on Shisha Pangma that struck within minutes of the summit, these mountains keep claiming the women who dare to conquer them. This is how it started. In the autumn of 1978, a group of American women set out for the north face of Annapurna, a mountain with a reputation for swallowing climbers whole. Led by Arlene Blum, a chemist and mountaineer, the team was not only fighting altitude and avalanche risk, they were also climbing against decades of exclusion. Their expedition was funded in part by a t-shirt campaign, selling shirts emblazoned with the phrase, "A woman's place is on top." The campaign raised $30,000, enough to cover travel, permits, and the contracts for Sherpa support. This was more than a climb, it was a statement. 12 women joined the team, including Vera Kamarkova, Alison Chadwick Oniskevich, Vera Watson, Michelle Brock, Suzanne Dupre, and Catherine Miller. The route they chose, the Dutch Rib, was notorious for its technical difficulty and exposure to avalanches. By the time their base camp was established, Annapurna's fatality-to-summit ratio stood at 9 deaths for every 8 summits, the highest of any 8,000-meter peak at the time. On October 12, after weeks of hauling gear and waiting out storms, the team pushed to Camp 3. The first summit attempt on October 13 included Kamarkova, Bloom, Chadwick Oniskiewicz, and Watson, but savage winds and fraying ropes forced a retreat. They descended, battered, but alive. 2 days later, on October 15, Kamarkova and Bloom set out again, this time with Sherpa Angmo and Pemba. At 8:15 UTC, Kamarkova and Bloom reached the summit. The Sherpas joined them at the top, and all 4 returned to camp. The achievement was historic, the first American and the first all-women ascent of Annapurna. But celebration was short-lived. Chadwick Oniskevich and Watson, exhausted and showing signs of altitude sickness, remained at the highest camp, nearly 7,400 meters above sea level. As the others descended, a sudden blizzard swept over the mountain. The Sherpas at high camp tried to help, but the storm forced everyone down. The next morning, the 2 women were gone. Only fragments of harness and a helmet were found later on the north face. Sherpa testimony, recorded in expedition logs and oral histories, confirmed the grim outcome. Both climbers had perished in the storm. Their remains eventually recovered and returned to their families. Annapurna's risk was no abstraction. Before 1978, just 8 climbers had stood on its summit. 9 had died trying. The American women's expedition added 2 more names to the mountain's toll. The technical demands of the Dutch Rib, the thin margin for error at altitude, and the October weather all contributed to the disaster. The team's composition, a mix of experienced and first-time high-altitude climbers, also played a role. With only 3 Sherpas at high camp, rescue options were limited. The feminist symbolism of the climb drew global attention, but it also brought scrutiny. Some media outlets celebrated the achievement, while others questioned the wisdom of sending an all-women team to such a dangerous peak. The T-shirt campaign became a symbol of both empowerment and risk, a reminder that breaking barriers often comes at a cost. For the Sherpas, whose efforts made the climb possible and who shouldered the burden of recovery, the expedition was another chapter in a long history of unheralded labor and loss. Discrepancies in later retellings, claims that 4 women summited or that $50,000 was raised, are clarified by the expedition's own logs. 2 women reached the top, and the T-shirt campaign brought in $30,000. The facts are stark. On October 15, 1978, 2 women stood on Annapurna's summit. 2 others vanished into the storm. The ratio of death to victory on that mountain remained unchanged. What began as a bid for history became a warning, one that would echo through every women's expedition that followed. On August 4, 1986, Julie Tullis reached the summit of K2, standing at 8,611 meters above sea level. She became the first British woman to do so, climbing alongside Austrian mountaineer Kurt Diemberger. Their ascent capped a season that had already been battered by instability, avalanches, hidden crevasses, and a series of near misses. But the summit was only the halfway point. As Tullis and Diemberger began their descent, Julie slipped on the upper slopes, likely striking her head. Disoriented and moving slowly, she and Diemberger managed to reach Camp 4, a high bivouac perched above 8,000 meters, but the weather began to turn. A low-pressure system settled over the Karakoram, bringing winds of 150 to 180 kilometers per hour and temperatures that plunged below minus 30 degrees Celsius. Heavy snow, over 30 centimeters in a matter of hours, piled onto the tents at Camp 4. Inside, 7 climbers huddled together, rationing food and oxygen, their bodies pressed against the thin nylon as the storm raged outside. The tent fabric, already strained by altitude and wind, finally gave way. A single violent gust ripped it open, collapsing the shelter and burying the group in a tangle of fabric, snow, and gear. There was no escape. For 3 days, the climbers remained trapped, forced to dig air pockets and share what little water remained as the storm battered the mountain. Julie's condition deteriorated rapidly. The head injury from her fall, combined with the effects of hypoxia and dehydration, left her slipping in and out of consciousness. On August 7th, she died in her sleep, still inside the collapsed tent. Her death was not the only one that season. In the span of 3 weeks, 13 climbers from 11 expeditions lost their lives on K2. The summer of 1986 became known as the Black Summer. The official records list Japanese, American, Canadian, Austrian, German, and Italian names among the dead. But Tullis's story stood out. She was not only a climber, but also a filmmaker and martial artist, a woman who had carved out space for herself in a world that often refused to acknowledge her place. Sherpa Hossein, who had helped fix ropes and ferry loads earlier in the season, attempted a rescue as soon as the winds dropped, but the damage was already done. Survivors described the aftermath as a scene of exhaustion and loss. Frostbitten hands, snow-blind eyes, and the silent form of Julie Tullis wrapped in a bivouac sack. Diemberger, in later interviews, spoke of the mental strain, how the storm seemed to erase not only the route down, but the will to continue. The few who made it off the mountain did so by crawling, stumbling, and supporting each other down the ice fields, leaving behind those who could not move. The season's death toll forced a reckoning. K2's West Ridge, with its narrow arites and unpredictable weather, had proven deadly even for the most experienced. The technical demands of the climb, combined with the lack of oxygen and the sudden collapse of high-altitude support, left little margin for error. For Julie Tullis, the summit was both a triumph and a trap, a place where achievement and disaster became inseparable. Her story, and the Black Summer as a whole, expanded the map of tragedy beyond Annapurna, reminding the world that on the world's highest peaks, every victory comes at a cost. Wanda Rutkiewicz's final expedition began in May 2092, high on the northwest ridge of Kangchenjunga. At 49, she was already a legend. First European woman atop Everest, first woman to summit K2 without supplemental oxygen, and the most accomplished female Himalayan climber of her era. Her ambition was singular, to become the first woman to climb all 14 of the world's 8,000-meter peaks. Kangchenjunga, at 8,586 meters, was to be her 9th. The Polish-Mexican team, led by Carlos Carsolio, established their highest camp just below 8,200 meters. On May 12th, as evening fell, Carsolio and Rutkiewicz reached the exposed snowfields above Camp 4. The wind had risen sharply, gusting to 120 kilometers per hour, and the temperature was dropping fast. Rutkiewicz, exhausted but determined, told Carsolio she would bivouac in a shallow snow cave rather than descend. Carsolio, facing worsening weather and fearing for his own safety, continued upward alone for a final summit push before turning back. He recorded in his diary that Rutkiewicz was last seen alive at 8,200 meters, hunkered down against the wind, her headlamp barely visible in the swirling snow. When dawn broke, she was gone. The snow cave was half collapsed, filled with drifted snow. No equipment, no sign of a struggle, only the faint imprint where she had waited out the night. Sherpa Pemba Rinchen, sent up as part of the search, found nothing but wind-scoured ice and fresh avalanche debris in the area. Over the next 3 days, search teams battled altitude sickness and worsening storms, but no trace of Rutkiewicz appeared. Later that year, an Italian team reported finding human remains on the far side of the mountain, but forensic analysis could not confirm an identity. The official record lists her as missing, presumed dead. The circumstances of Rutkiewicz's disappearance remain unresolved. Some believe she attempted the summit in the early hours, only to be overtaken by hypoxia and cold. Others suggest a collapse of the snow cave or a hidden crevasse claimed her during the night. The absence of her gear, her downsuit bivouac kit, and even her climbing harness has fueled decades of speculation. Family and fellow climbers describe her as meticulous, never one to take unnecessary risks, always carrying contingency supplies. Yet, at over 8,000 meters, even the best prepared are at the mercy of the mountain. Rutkiewicz's vanishing left a vacuum, no body, no definitive cause, only the silence of Kangchenjunga's upper slopes. Her story stands apart not just for her achievements, but for the enduring mystery that lingers on the world's third highest peak. In the years since, debates have continued. Did she summit? Was the decision to bivouac a calculated risk or a final act of desperation? The answers remain buried beneath wind and snow, a reminder that in the death zone, even legends can vanish without a trace. Alison Hargreaves arrived at the base of K2 in June 1995, just weeks after her solo ascent of Everest without bottled oxygen or Sherpa support. Her plan was as ambitious as it was daunting. Summit K2, the world's second highest and most dangerous peak, as part of a solo trilogy that would include Kangchenjunga. Hargreaves was no stranger to risk. By age 33, she had soloed the 6 great north faces of the Alps in a single season and become a fixture in the tight-knit world of elite alpinism. But on K2, the challenge was not only the mountain's notorious weather and technical walls, it was the relentless gaze of the press. On August 13, 1995, Hargreaves stood on K2's summit at 6:45 p.m., alone except for 6 other climbers scattered along the ridge. The weather, already unstable, deteriorated rapidly as the group began their descent. By nightfall, a violent storm swept across the upper slopes, driving winds over 160 kilometers per hour and dropping the temperature below -30 degrees Celsius. At 8,400 meters, Hargreaves and the other summiteers were caught in the open, battered by gusts strong enough to tear tents from the ice. Her blood-stained anorak and a single climbing boot were later found on the ridge. No body was ever recovered. 7 climbers died that night, but it was Hargreaves' fate that dominated headlines worldwide. The British press seized on her story with a singular focus. Hargreaves was not just a climber, she was a mother of 2, Tom, age 6, and Kate, just 4. In the months before her K2 attempt, reporters had questioned her judgment, asking why a mother would risk her life on such a lethal mountain. After her death, that scrutiny intensified. A content analysis of 120 British newspaper articles published over the 1995 climbing season found that 70% mentioned her role as a mother, often in the opening lines. Headlines called her the mother who abandoned her children for glory, and columnists debated whether ambition or parental duty should have prevailed. The same coverage rarely, if ever, applied to fathers lost on the same slopes. The intense motherhood scrutiny became a focal point of the press. Hargreaves herself had addressed the criticism in interviews. She said, "If you are given 2 options, take the harder one because you will regret it if you do not," before leaving for Pakistan. Her climbing partner, Sherpa Gurung Nawang, later recounted how she spoke of her children often, carrying their photos in a waterproof pouch. But the narrative that crystallized after her death was not about her skill, her discipline, or her historic solo climbs. It was about motherhood and loss. The aftermath left a deep mark on her family. Tom Ballard, her son, would later become a renowned alpinist himself, disappearing on Nanga Parbat in 2019. For many in the climbing world, the way Hargreaves was remembered revealed as much about cultural expectation as it did about risk. Her death became a case study in gendered scrutiny, an athlete's achievements measured not only by what she accomplished, but by what she left behind. The enduring legacy continues to spark debate. The debate over her legacy continues. Some hold up her final season as a testament to human possibility. Others see in her story a warning about the cost of ambition, magnified by a society that asks different questions of women who climb. The ongoing debate reflects both admiration and caution. Yasuko Namba left Camp 4 on Everest's South Col in the early hours of May 10, 1996. At 47, she was the oldest woman to attempt the world's highest peak, and the final summit would complete her 7 summits quest. The route that day was crowded. More than 30 climbers set out for the top, many from commercial expeditions that had transformed Everest into a global proving ground. Namba moved slowly but steadily above 8,600 meters, pressing on through the death zone as the wind began to rise. By late afternoon, she reached the summit. The time was after 1 p.m., hours past the usual safe turnaround. Photographs show her holding a Japanese flag, her face nearly obscured by goggles and frost, but the summit was only the midpoint. As she began her descent, a cyclone system, later clocked at over 70 kilometers per hour, swept across the upper mountain. Visibility dropped. Temperatures plunged to minus 30 degrees Celsius. The route below the south summit, already jammed with exhausted climbers, became a bottleneck. Namba's guide, Lakpa Sangai Sherpa, tried to keep her moving, but she was weak from the climb, and her oxygen supply was running low. Around 8,500 meters, she collapsed in the snow. Other climbers passed by, many themselves in survival mode. Some, like Beck Weathers, were in worse shape. As night fell, a whiteout engulfed the South Current. 8 climbers would die in the storm, 3 from the Adventure Consultants team, 3 from Mountain Madness, and 2 independent climbers, including Namba. The next morning, guides and Sherpas mounted a rescue. They found Namba and Weathers together, barely conscious, half buried by drifting snow. Weathers was left for dead, only to stagger back to camp hours later with severe frostbite. Namba was not so lucky. She died in the night, less than 300 meters from the safety of her tent. Her body remained on the mountain for years, a stark reminder of the cost of crowding and commercial ambition. Everest's 1996 disaster exposed the dangers of mass-market expeditions. Bottlenecks at the Hillary Step delayed climbers for hours in the thin air. The sheer number of people above 8,000 meters strained resources, oxygen, guides, even basic rescue ability. Namba's experience was shaped not only by the mountain, but by the growing industry around it. She had climbed with discipline and determination, but in the chaos of a crowded summit push, even the most prepared could be left behind. Her story, later chronicled in John Krakauer's Into Thin Air, was often overshadowed by the survival tales of Western climbers. But the facts remain. Yasuko Namba became the second Japanese woman to summit Everest, and the only woman to die in the 1996 storm. Her death, along with 7 others, forced the world to reckon with a new era on Everest, one where the race for records and the crush of guided clients would test the limits of safety, ethics, and human endurance. Chantal Mauduite approached the world's highest peaks with a conviction that climbing could be both bold and gentle. By 1998, she had already summited 6 of the 14 8,000-meter giants, always without supplemental oxygen, always with the belief that the mountains deserved respect, not conquest. Her philosophy was clear: leave no trace, move lightly, and trust in the balance between ambition and humility. On Dhaulagiri, she brought this ethic to its limit. The spring of 1998 brought wild swings in temperature to the Dhaulagiri Massif. Daytime heat softened the snowpack, while night temperatures plummeted below minus 20 degrees Celsius. This cycle transformed the slopes above Camp 2 into a trap, layers of unstable snow, invisible to the naked eye, waiting for the smallest trigger. Mauduit's team, including Sherpa Mani Kang, pushed for a clean climb, no fixed ropes, no high-altitude porters beyond their small group, and no oxygen. Their camp at 6,500 meters was pitched in a hollow, chosen for shelter from wind but exposed to the mountain's shifting moods. On May 9th, Mauduit and Mani Kang reached the summit of Dhaulagiri. It was a quiet victory. No crowds, no banners, just the thin air and the knowledge that they had climbed on their own terms. That night, the temperature dropped swiftly. the snow, warmed by the day's sun, began to settle and crack. In the early hours of May 10th, a small avalanche broke loose above Camp 2. It wasn't the dramatic, thundering slide that fills headlines. Instead, it was a silent, heavy wave that buried their tent in seconds. The collapse was total. Later, rescuers found both climbers inside, their bodies undisturbed, except for the snow that had pressed the tent flat. The autopsy would reveal that Mauduit died instantly from a broken neck, likely caused by the weight of the falling snow and ice. Mauduit had written about the need for a different kind of heroism in the mountains, a willingness to accept limits, to walk away when conditions turned. Yet, even for those who honor the mountain, the line between safety and disaster remains invisible. The avalanche that killed her was not the result of recklessness or bravado. It was the product of nature's own logic, temperature, gravity, and time. Mani Kang, who had supported Mauduit on previous climbs, shared her commitment to minimal impact. Their deaths became a stark rebuttal to the idea that purity of style can shield anyone from the mountain's hazards. In the aftermath, the French mountaineering community mourned not just a pioneer, but a voice for a gentler, more thoughtful approach to high-altitude climbing. The tragedy on Dhaulagiri forced climbers and commentators alike to question the romantic language often used to describe risk. Mauduit's legacy is not only in the summits she reached, but in the reminder that even the most careful, ethical approach cannot erase the dangers that define the world's highest peaks. Hilary Nelson's name had become synonymous with pushing boundaries in high-altitude ski mountaineering. Known for her precision and nerve, she'd already made history as the first woman to summit Everest and Lhotse in a single day, and the first to ski from Lhotse's summit. By 2022, Nelson was setting her sights even higher, joined by Sherpa Mingma Tenzing on Manaslu, the world's 8th highest peak. Their objective, a full ski descent from the summit, down a route graded S4 to S5, terrain that demands absolute focus, where a single misstep can be fatal. On October 6, a rare window of clear weather opened. Nelson and Mingma Tenzing began their ascent, climbing through brittle snow and thin air. By the morning of October 7, they stood at 8,163 meters, skis strapped to their packs, facing a steep face of wind-sculpted snow. The air was razor-thin, the snowpack unpredictable, but the visibility was flawless, a rare advantage on Manaslu's upper slopes. Nelson clicked into her bindings and dropped over the summit cornice, carving turns down a face where every move had to be perfect. Skiing above 8,000 meters is a test of judgment and nerve. Fatigue and altitude slow reflexes, and the margin for error shrinks to nothing. Each turn was a calculation, every traverse a risk. The route was littered with hidden crevasses and the threat of slab avalanches, hazards that even the most seasoned mountaineers can't always anticipate. Just below the summit, a cornice suddenly gave way beneath Nelson's skis. The fracture line snapped, releasing a slab of snow that swept her off her feet. Witnesses described a sharp crack, then silence as she vanished down the face. Mingma Tenzing, just behind, called for help, but the slope was too steep and the fall too fast. Nelson was carried nearly 1,500 meters down Manaslu's south face, out of sight in the thin Himalayan air. Rescue teams mobilized immediately, but the altitude and terrain slowed every step. It took 2 days to reach her. On October 9, they found her body far below the summit, still clipped into her harness. The cause was clear: a fatal fall triggered by the collapse of a wind-loaded cornice, a danger that can strike without warning, even for the most skilled. Nelson's death sent shockwaves through the climbing world, a stark reminder that as ambitions in ski alpinism rise, so are the risks. At 2:15 UTC on October 7, 2023, Anna Gutu's GPS marked her arrival at the summit of Shisha Pangma. 5 minutes later, Gina Rzuchidlo's device logged her own summit, both women standing at 8,027 meters, completing their quest for all 14 8,000-meter peaks. Their guides, Mingmar Sherpa and Tenjen Lama, moved alongside them, the four pushing upward through the aftermath of a heavy snowstorm. The climb was a race against time. Just 3 days before, Gutu and Rizuchidlo had summited Dhaulagiri, leaving little room for rest or acclimatization. The pressure to become the first American woman to finish the 14-peak circuit drove a relentless pace. Shisha Pangma, though the lowest of the 8,000 ERs, is infamous for unstable snow on its northwestern slopes, especially after fresh storms. By 3:30 UTC, as the teams began their descent, the mountain's silence broke. A deep, hollow crack echoed above 7,800 meters. A slab of snow, 1.2 meters thick and loaded with 150 millimeters of new precipitation, sheared away. The avalanche swept Gutu and Mingmar Sherpa from the fixed line, burying them in seconds. A French team nearby radioed for help, initially reporting a serac collapse, but satellite imagery later confirmed a wind-loaded slab, avalanche. The fracture line stretched 250 meters above the route, triggered by the weight of climbers crossing an unstable snowpack. Rescue teams scrambled upward, but at 5:45 UTC, a second avalanche struck. Gina Rizuchidlo and Tenjin Lama were caught while traversing the same slope. The earlier slide had destabilized the snow, releasing a secondary slab, a pattern seen when new snow sits atop a weak base. Within hours, both climbers were missing, presumed buried beneath tons of snow and ice. By 6:30, search teams reached the first debris field and recovered the bodies of Gutu and Mingmar. Rizuchidlo and Tenjin Lama were never found. Their last known locations were logged by radio and GPS, then lost to the mountain. The avalanches struck with such speed and force that rescue was impossible. Survivors described a chain reaction, one collapse setting off another, with almost no warning. The drive for records, the pressure of sponsorships, and the narrow weather window had set the stage for disaster. By nightfall, the climbing world was left with stark facts. 2 women, both at the height of their careers, reached the summit and were claimed by Shisha Pangma within hours. Shockwaves from the Shisha Pangma disaster reached far beyond the mountain itself. In February 2024, the International Alpine Federation issued a provisional ban targeting speed record attempts on 8,000-meter peaks. Their statement cited the events on Shisha Pangma directly, freezing permits for any expedition aiming to exceed 300 meters of vertical gain per hour, unless a certified high-altitude medical team is present. The moratorium, still under review, was the first of its kind in Himalayan climbing history. Federation officials defended the decision by pointing to the surge in commercial expeditions and the mounting pressure on guides to deliver rapid summits, often at the expense of safety protocols and acclimatization. Industry sponsors faced their own reckoning. Patagonia, a leading outdoor apparel brand and a longtime supporter of high-profile expeditions, released a public statement in March 2024. The company condemned what it called the commercialization of high-altitude climbing that prizes rapid summits over safety. Patagonia suspended all sponsorships for fast-track summit campaigns, demanding new safety standards and clearer protocols before returning to the big mountain arena. Their spokesperson cited the loss of Anna Gutu and Gina Rizuchidlo as a breaking point, adding that no record is worth a life. Other sponsors followed suit, quietly reviewing contracts and pausing support for teams chasing speed records. Behind the scenes, guiding agencies scrambled to adapt. Elite Expeditions, the guiding firm whose Sherpas accompanied Gutu and Rizuchidlo, faced inquiries from both the IAF and insurance underwriters. Questions centered on the decision to attempt 2 8,000-meter peaks in 3 days, the lack of rest between climbs, and the absence of an on-site medical team during the Shisha Pangma push. The backlash extended to social media and climbing forums, where veteran alpinists and rescue specialists debated the ethics of commercial pressure. Some pointed to sponsored posts and stage summit photos as evidence of a system that rewards speed and spectacle over sound judgment. Others argued that the race for firsts, especially among women seeking historic milestones, had become a marketing tool, fueling a cycle in which climbers felt compelled to take ever greater risks to satisfy sponsors and followers alike. The debate was not limited to the climbing world. Mainstream news outlets ran op-eds and interviews with industry insiders, many of whom questioned whether the pursuit of records had finally outpaced the sport's unwritten code of self-preservation. The IAF's provisional ban and Patagonia's public withdrawal signaled a rare moment of institutional pushback. But the underlying forces, media attention, commercial incentives, and the relentless drive for achievement remained unresolved. In the aftermath of Shisha Pangma, the global climbing community found itself at a crossroads, forced to confront the costs of ambition in an era where tragedy and triumph are separated by the thinnest of margins. No summit erases the risk. Women now account for 1 in 4 fatalities on Himalayan peaks, even as their numbers and records rise. The drive for recognition and legacy meets an industry that sometimes values headlines over safety. What's at stake is more than ambition. It's the cost of being seen. The mountain doesn't care who climbs it, but the world still does. Share your thoughts below.